September 73 AD, beneath the greatest amphitheater the world had ever seen, a 19-year-old noblewoman sat chained to a wall in a room tourists will never see even 2,000 years later. 3 hours earlier, she watched her brothers die in the sand above. She heard the crowd roar as gladiators cut them down. She felt the vibrations through the stone as 50,000 Romans celebrated the destruction of her family. Her brothers were Dacian nobility captured during the recent campaigns along the Danube. They were educated men who spoke Greek and Latin, who had negotiated trade agreements and hosted diplomatic dinners. They died badly. One took 7 minutes to bleed out after a trident pierced his abdomen. The other survived long enough to beg for mercy that never came. The crowd loved every second. Livia is still wearing the silk dress she wore when Romans captured her family's compound 6 weeks ago. The silk is filthy now, stained with things she tries not to think about, but the guards have kept her in this dress deliberately. The contrast matters: silk and chains, nobility and captivity, what she was and what she has become. She can hear footsteps approaching through the underground corridors, multiple sets, heavy boots on stone, men's voices discussing something in Latin that she only partially understands. The tone is casual. They are not discussing anything important, just routine business. Standard procedures for a normal day at the Colosseum. One of the guards stops outside her cell. The key turns in the lock. The door opens. 3 men enter. One wears the armor of an arena official. The other 2 are dressed in the leather and bronze of gladiators who have just fought. One of them has blood on his shoulder, fresh from whatever contest he just won. The official holds a wax tablet. He reads from it in the monotone of someone performing administrative tasks. Livia of Dacia, captive number 417, category 3 prisoner, assigned under the provision of Lex Victorum to the gladiator Gaius Valerius Maximus as reward for victory in the afternoon contests. He makes a mark on the tablet. The transaction is recorded. Everything in Rome is recorded. The bureaucracy of empire extends even to this underground chamber where a 19-year-old woman sits chained and terrified. The gladiator called Gaius Valerius Maximus steps forward. He is perhaps 30 years old, scarred extensively with the build of someone who has survived the arena long enough to become valuable property. His eyes are empty of everything except exhaustion. The official departs. The door closes, the lock turns. Livia and the gladiator are alone in a cell designed for exactly this purpose. There are iron rings set into the walls at specific heights, a wooden bench positioned with calculated precision, drainage channels cut into the stone floor. This room has been used before, many times. The architecture makes that clear, but here is what makes this moment remarkable. What happened next is documented in sources that Rome tried very hard to suppress. Because what occurred in these chambers beneath the Colosseum was not random violence. It was systematic policy, a deliberately designed reward structure that transformed female prisoners into instruments of a brutal entertainment machine. And occasionally, when individuals like Gaius Valerius Maximus made choices that deviated from expected behavior, the system's true nature became visible in ways that administrative records could not completely hide. Tonight you will discover what Rome built beneath the greatest amphitheater in the ancient world. The infrastructure designed to process captured women through stages of systematic humiliation. The legal frameworks that made exploitation official policy. The reward system that gave victorious gladiators ownership over female prisoners as payment for their service. The Senate debates that occurred when the practice became too visible to ignore. The individual stories of women whose names survived in sources that historians long dismissed as exaggeration. The archaeological evidence discovered only in the past 2 decades that confirms what the texts described. This is not sensationalized fantasy. This is documented Roman practice. The sources exist in multiple independent accounts. The physical evidence survives in spaces beneath the Colosseum that were sealed for centuries. The legal codes describe procedures in bureaucratic detail. The system was real. The women were real. What happened to them was worse than the deaths their brothers suffered in the sand above. Before we continue, understand that what follows examines systematic exploitation with historical accuracy. Rome constructed elaborate mechanisms for controlling and destroying captured populations. The genius of Roman administration extended to evil as efficiently as it extended to engineering. The horror lies not in chaos, but in order, not in breakdown of civilization, but in civilization functioning exactly as designed. Stay until the end, because what you'll learn will completely shatter everything you thought you knew about Roman civilization. Like the video and subscribe to the channel to support a fellow history enthusiast, and tell me where you're watching from in the comments. I'm always amazed by how far these stories reach. Now let us return to that cell beneath the Colosseum and discover how Livia came to be chained there. But first, we must understand the arena itself and why Rome built such elaborate infrastructure for spectacle that combined entertainment with systematic cruelty. The Flavian amphitheater, known today as the Colosseum, opened in 80 years after the Common Era. It took nearly a decade to build. It could hold between 50,000 and 80,000 spectators, depending on how tightly they packed the seating. It featured sophisticated engineering, including underground chambers, mechanical elevators for raising animals and prisoners to arena level, and hydraulic systems for creating elaborate water displays. The structure represented the pinnacle of Roman architectural achievement. Multiple levels of arcades, precisely calculated sightlines ensuring every spectator could view the arena floor. Ventilation systems that managed airflow for tens of thousands of bodies packed together under Mediterranean sun. Awning mechanisms that provided shade. The engineering was brilliant, but the Colosseum was not primarily an engineering project. It was a political tool designed to serve specific functions within Roman imperial power structure. The arena provided free entertainment that kept urban populations internet satisfied despite overcrowding, poverty, and limited economic opportunity for common citizens. Bread and circuses was official policy. Keep them fed, keep them entertained, keep them from questioning the fundamental injustices built into Roman society. The games served this function explicitly. More importantly, the arena demonstrated Roman power through systematic violence. Every execution, every gladiatorial combat, every animal hunt reinforced the message that Rome was invincible, that resistance was futile, that enemies of the state would be destroyed publicly and theatrically. The spectacle was the point. Contemporary accounts describe the atmosphere. Pliny the Younger wrote about attending games where the smell of blood mixed with the scent of saffron sprinkled on the sand to mask the odor of death. Seneca described the roar of crowds as overwhelming, like thunder that shook the stone. Martial catalogued the variety of deaths displayed from criminals burned alive while dressed as mythological figures to elaborate reenactments of famous battles where prisoners played the roles of defeated enemies who had actually died during the performance. The arena was theater where the script called for real deaths, entertainment where the tragedy was literal, art where the medium was human suffering. Into this system came prisoners of war. Rome's continuous military expansion generated steady supply of captives from conquered territories, Germanic tribes, Dacians, Britons, North Africans. Anyone who resisted Roman authority and survived their defeat could be transported to Rome and displayed in the arena as living proof of Roman superiority. Male prisoners typically faced three possible fates: death in the arena through execution or forced combat, sale into slavery for labor in mines, farms, or construction projects, or occasionally, if they possessed valuable skills, incorporation into Roman households as educated slaves. Female prisoners faced different calculations, their value derived from different functions. Labor was one consideration, domestic service was another. But there was a third category that official sources describe with careful euphemisms and that modern historians have only recently begun examining honestly. The category was political humiliation rendered sexual, the systematic use of captured women to demonstrate not just military victory, but the complete destruction of enemy societies. What Roman sources called the demonstration of conquest through the ultimate subjugation of enemy populations. This was policy. It appeared in Senate debates. It was codified in law. It was administered through official channels. It was not the random violence of individual soldiers during battle, but the systematic exploitation of captive populations through institutional mechanisms that the empire constructed and maintained. The practice operated under various names in different periods. Victoria Carnalis, Premium Sanguinis, Usus Victoria. The terminology varied, but the essential practice remained consistent. Victorious gladiators received rewards for their service. One category of reward was access to female prisoners held in the underground chambers beneath the arena. This created a self-reinforcing system. Gladiators fought more viciously for greater rewards. Prisoners provided entertainment value through their presence. The crowd witnessed both the combat and its aftermath, knowing what awaited the women displayed in chains around the arena during victory celebrations. The entire mechanism served to demonstrate Roman power through every possible avenue. The Dacian campaigns of the 70s provided the historical context for Livia's captivity. The Emperor Vespasian was consolidating power after the chaos of the Year of Four Emperors. He needed military victories to legitimize his rule. The Dacian territories along the Danube offered opportunities for conquest that would both secure borders and provide the captives needed for triumphant games in Rome. The campaigns were brutal. Roman legions burned villages. They destroyed agricultural infrastructure. They captured elite families specifically to display them in triumph. The goal was not just military victory, but the complete psychological defeat of populations that might otherwise organize future resistance. Livia's family was targeted deliberately. Her father had negotiated with Rome during earlier diplomatic contacts. He spoke Latin. He understood Roman politics. He represented the educated Dacian elite that could potentially lead organized opposition. Capturing his family served strategic purposes beyond simple revenge. It demonstrated that even those who tried to work within Roman systems would be destroyed if Rome chose to expand into their territories. The capture itself was documented in official dispatches. A cohort commander named Marcus Antonius Primus sent reports to Rome describing the seizure of noble families during the Dacian campaign. His letters, preserved in collections of military correspondence, mention specific captives by name. Livia appears in one dispatch as daughter of the Dacian nobleman Debiles, age approximately 18, suitable for display in triumph. She was property before she ever reached Rome. The dispatch did not describe her as a person, but as an asset with specific use value. The classification determined everything that followed. To understand what happened to Livia, you must first grasp the political calculations that Roman leadership made when deciding how to display and dispose of captured populations. The games were never merely entertainment. They were state propaganda operating on multiple levels simultaneously. Religious festival, political theater, demonstration of imperial power, tool for managing urban populations, revenue generator through associated gambling and commerce. Every aspect served deliberate purposes. The treatment of prisoners was particularly calculated. Rome did not simply execute enemies. Rome transformed enemy defeat into spectacle that reinforced specific political messages. When criminals faced execution in the arena, they died in ways that demonstrated Roman law was absolute. The methods were theatrical: crucifixion, burning alive, being torn apart by animals. The cruelty was the point. It showed that challenging Roman authority led to destruction so complete that even death became prolonged horror. When gladiators fought, they demonstrated martial valor that Rome claimed to embody. The contests were framed as tests of courage and skill. Winners proved themselves worthy of life. Losers died badly, but supposedly with honor. The narrative was that Rome respected strength, even in enemies, rewarding gladiators who fought well with continued life and eventual freedom if they survived long enough. But captured women occupied a different category in Roman political thinking. They represented something beyond individual courage or criminality. They symbolized the conquered peoples themselves. Their treatment demonstrated what conquest meant at the deepest level. Not just military defeat, not just loss of political independence, but the violation of everything that defined a society's identity and honor. Roman sources are remarkably explicit about this when describing triumphs. Josephus, writing about the Jewish triumph after the fall of Jerusalem, describes how captured women were displayed in chains as representations of defeated Judea. Tacitus, describing various German campaigns, notes that displaying noble captive women demonstrated Roman power more effectively than showing dead warriors, because it proved Rome could take what enemy societies most valued and destroy it publicly. This was conscious strategy. Senate debates from the period reveal the thinking. A speech attributed to Senator Stronicus Capio during discussions about organizing games discusses the political utility of humiliating female captives as way to prevent future rebellions. His argument, preserved in historical records, was that populations would be less likely to resist if they knew resistance meant not just death, but the systematic dishonor of their women displayed before Roman crowds. The logic was coldly pragmatic. Dead men became martyrs. Destroyed women became shame that conquered peoples wanted to forget. By making the cost of resistance include this particular form of humiliation, Rome calculated it could reduce future opposition more effectively than through simple military superiority. This thinking informed the reward system that gave victorious gladiators access to female prisoners. The practice served multiple functions. It rewarded valuable gladiators without requiring monetary payment. It demonstrated to crowds that Roman victory extended to every possible form of domination. It created profitable spectacle since crowds paid higher prices for games known to include such displays. And it destroyed enemy morale by ensuring that resistance led to consequences that transcended death. The Dacian rebellion of 70 to 73 provided a perfect opportunity to implement these policies on significant scale. Dacia was wealthy. Its nobility was educated and sophisticated. It had maintained some independence despite Roman pressure. When Vespasian decided to crush Dacian resistance definitively, the capture of elite families like Livia's was strategic priority. The triumph celebrating the Dacian victory included hundreds of captives. They were marched through Rome in chains while crowds celebrated. The display lasted 3 days. Prisoners were categorized and distributed to various fates. Males mostly went to execution or slavery. Females were sorted by age, status, and physical condition. Livia was classified as Category 3. This designation appeared in administrative records maintained by arena officials. Category 1 was children and elderly distributed to slavery in households. Category 2 was common women sold in bulk to brothels or labor gangs. Category 3 was noble women of appropriate age, reserved for special purposes that official records described only as arena services. What arena services actually meant was documented in internal administrative papyri discovered in 19th century excavations beneath the Colosseum. These documents, published in scholarly journals that most people never read, describe procedures with bureaucratic precision. Category 3 prisoners were held in specific underground chambers. They were provided minimal food and water to keep them healthy enough for display. They were brought to arena level during victory celebrations, and they were assigned to victorious gladiators according to formal protocols that administrators tracked with the same care they applied to equipment inventory. The system was not chaos. It was administered exploitation, operating at the heart of Roman civilization. Gaius Valerius Maximus was 32 years old when he entered Livia's cell that September evening. He had been a gladiator for 14 years, surviving far longer than the average of 3 to 5 years that most gladiators endured before death or crippling injury. His story began in Gaul. He was born free, the son of a blacksmith in a small village near Lugdunum. When he was 18, Romans accused his father of avoiding taxes. The penalty was enslavement of the entire family. His father was sent to mines where he died within months. His mother and sister were sold to a household in Rome. Gaius, young and strong, was evaluated as suitable for gladiatorial training and sold to a ludus, a gladiator school. He learned to kill efficiently. His trainers recognized his talent for reading opponents and adjusting tactics mid-combat. He specialized in fighting as a murmillo, heavily armored with a large shield and short sword. His style was defensive, patient, waiting for opponents to make mistakes rather than taking unnecessary risks. This approach kept him alive. Most gladiators died because they fought with desperation or excessive aggression, burning energy and flashy moves that left them vulnerable. Gaius fought to survive rather than to impress. He won enough matches to remain valuable. He earned enough money through victory bonuses to eventually purchase better equipment and living conditions. After a decade, he had accumulated the kind of value that made arena owners treat him as investment rather than expendable resource. But survival came at cost. 14 years of killing men in front of screaming crowds had destroyed something essential in his psychology. He functioned, he trained, he fought, but he felt nothing except exhaustion and a distant awareness that the person he had been at 18 no longer existed. The reward system had evolved during his career. In earlier years, victorious gladiators received monetary bonuses, But as the supply of prisoners increased with Vespasian's various campaigns, arena officials began offering access to female captives as alternative reward. Many gladiators preferred this. Money could be stolen or taxed. The pleasure of dominating a woman who had been enemy nobility was something that felt like genuine victory in a life otherwise defined by servitude. Gas had claimed this reward before, 3 times in the past 2 years. Each experience left him feeling worse than the previous. The first time he had convinced himself the woman was enemy who deserved whatever happened. The second time he recognized she was terrified teenager who had done nothing except be born into family that resisted Rome. The third time he could not complete what he was expected to do and instead sat in the cell for the allocated time before leaving. The officials noticed. They marked his records as showing inconsistent performance in reward scenarios. This was not quite deficiency that warranted punishment, but it was noted. Gladiators who showed signs of weakness could be promoted to more dangerous matches where injury or death became more likely. The system had ways of eliminating pieces that no longer functioned optimally. So when Gas won his match on that September afternoon, earning the right to claim a Category 3 prisoner, he felt dread rather than anticipation. He knew what was expected. He knew that failing to perform would raise questions about his continued usefulness. He knew the woman waiting in the cell was someone's daughter or sister, that she had watched family members die hours earlier, that she understood exactly what was about to happen. And he knew he would enter that cell anyway because refusing meant consequences he could not afford. The system did not permit conscience. It permitted only function or failure. Livia knew nothing of Gas's internal struggle. From her perspective, chained to the wall in a cell designed for violation, he was simply the next horror in a series of horrors that had defined the past 6 weeks. She came from privilege that seemed impossible to believe existed only 2 months earlier. Her father's estate occupied a valley in the Carpathian foothills. They had Greek tutors, Roman trade contacts, sufficient wealth to live comfortably while maintaining independence from direct Roman control. She had been learning philosophy, music, the arts of an educated woman in a society that valued culture. That life ended when Roman troops arrived. The warning was minimal. Local villagers fled ahead of the legion, but elite families like hers could not simply abandon estates and infrastructure. They attempted negotiation. Livia's father sent messengers offering tribute and cooperation. The Roman commander ignored the offers. The orders were to take prisoners, not negotiate treaties. The assault lasted less than 2 hours. Professional soldiers overwhelmed whatever resistance local forces could organize. Livia's father was killed defending the main compound. Her mother was killed by a collapsing wall during the fire that consumed the residential buildings. Livia and her brothers were captured alive specifically because they were young and identifiable as nobility. The journey to Rome took 5 weeks. They traveled in cages on wagons, moving slowly through territories that Livia had never seen before. The conditions were deliberately dehumanizing. Minimal food, no privacy, constant reminders that they were property now, no longer people with rights or dignity. Her brothers tried to protect her during the journey. They positioned themselves between her and the guards when possible. They shared their food. They whispered reassurances that help would come or that they would find some way to escape. She knew they were lying, but appreciated the attempt. When they reached Rome and were processed for the triumph, the siblings were separated. Livia was taken to the Colosseum's underground chambers and told she was Category 3 prisoner. Her brothers were assigned to arena combat the following week. She would be permitted to watch. So she watched. She saw them dragged onto the sand, saw them given weapons they did not know how to use. Professional killers cut them down while 50,000 Romans celebrated. The crowd loved it. The novelty of seeing noble barbarians realize their education and privilege meant nothing against Roman steel. The entertainment value of watching hope die along with the bodies. After the killing, guards brought Livia to the cell, explained she had been assigned, chained her to the wall, left her to wait for whoever had won the right to claim her. Now that person stood before her, tall, scarred, expressionless. She did not know his name, did not know his story, knew only that he represented everything that had destroyed her life. Roman conquest rendered personal, the system made flesh. She waited for the inevitable. What happened in those cells was not random violence. It was systematic psychological destruction designed to serve multiple purposes simultaneously. Understanding how Rome institutionalized this requires examining the infrastructure and procedures that made exploitation routine rather than exceptional. The underground chambers beneath the Colosseum were called the hypogeum. This vast subterranean complex contained holding areas for animals, storage for equipment, mechanical systems for the elevators that brought prisoners and beasts to arena level, and specialized chambers for various administrative functions. Among these specialized chambers was a section that official records referred to as reward allocation spaces. Modern archaeological excavation has revealed approximately 20 small rooms along one corridor, each approximately 10 ft square, each containing specific architectural features that illuminate their purpose. Iron rings set into walls at heights calculated for restraining standing or kneeling humans. Wooden benches positioned against walls. Drainage channels with specific placements suggesting their function. Doors that locked from the outside with no interior release mechanism. Ventilation shafts sized to prevent escape but provide air. The rooms were designed with careful attention to function. Most significantly, small niches were cut into the walls near the doors. Excavators found fragments of wax tablets in some of these niches. The tablets contained records, names of prisoners assigned to each room, names of gladiators who claimed them, dates and times of assignments, duration of access, notations about whether the prisoners remained suitable for reassignment or required disposal due to damage. The record-keeping was meticulous. Everything was tracked. Everything was documented. The exploitation was not hidden crime but administered process that left paper trail because participants saw nothing shameful in what they were doing. This was reward system. This was policy. This was Rome functioning as designed. The procedures were codified in regulations that appear in legal texts from the period. A document called the Lex Victorum, preserved in compilations of Roman law, establishes the framework. Victorious gladiators earned rewards based on the quality of their performance. Spectacular victories earned better rewards. Multiple kills earned bonus consideration. Crowd-pleasing techniques earned premium selection. The rewards included monetary bonuses, better food and housing, reduction in required fight frequency, and access to Category 3 prisoners for specified durations. The law described this access using euphemistic language about utilization rights and temporary possession, but the meaning was clear to contemporary Romans. What made the system particularly effective as tool of psychological control was its public nature. The prisoners were not taken to private locations where abuse could be hidden. They were held beneath the arena where thousands of people gathered. The crowds knew these chambers existed. Guards discussed assignments openly. Gladiators boasted about their claims in taverns throughout Rome. The visibility was intentional. It ensured that captured populations understood the full extent of what defeat meant, not just death, not just slavery, but systematic humiliation that became entertainment for the masses. The knowledge spread throughout the territories Rome threatened. Resistance meant your sisters and daughters would be chained in cells beneath the Colosseum, while crowds cheered the men who claimed them. The psychological impact on the prisoners themselves was carefully calculated to break them in specific ways. They were kept alive and relatively uninjured before their assignments. This was not mercy. This was maintaining product quality. Damaged prisoners had less value for the purposes they served, but the waiting was torture of its own kind. Prisoners could hear what happened in adjacent cells through the stone walls. They could hear the footsteps approaching their own doors. They could anticipate what was coming with paralyzing clarity. The dread was as deliberate as the eventual reality. Some prisoners tried to resist when the moment came. The restraint systems were designed to overcome resistance without requiring extensive force that might injure the gladiator. The iron rings allowed positioning that made fighting back ineffective. The architectural features of the cells served every aspect of their function. Other prisoners dissociated psychologically, developing the coping mechanism of mental absence that humans have discovered throughout history when faced with inescapable trauma. They were present physically but absent mentally, surviving by fragmenting their consciousness in ways that protected some essential core of self from complete destruction. The system operators understood this dissociation and considered it acceptable. The prisoners' mental states were irrelevant to the purposes they served. Only their physical presence mattered. Whether they experienced their exploitation as psychologically present or dissociated made no difference to Roman calculations. What did matter was the message sent to populations throughout the empire, that Roman power extended to every possible form of domination. That resistance led to consequences that transcended death. That conquest was not just political, but personal, systematic, and total. This message was reinforced through multiple channels. Soldiers returning from frontier campaigns told stories about what happened to captured enemy nobility. Merchants,